Okay, so before we start learning the symbols of the IPA themselves, I want to set up with this video looking at why we have an international phonetic alphabet in the first place. Now, the IPA is a way to describe how people pronounce words in their language. It's built on our phonetic understanding. So here's a very broad look at it. Don't be too scared. Don't worry too much about all the fine detail here. It's a big chart, so you might not be able to see all of the details. That's okay. This isn't for learning all the details. It's just a broad look at it. Um, I want to first of all talk about two key principles of the IPA. One is that it's consistent and universal, right? That means consistent means that it's the same across languages, and universal. It's the same across languages. So for every symbol in the IPA, no matter what language it shows up in, it represents the same sound. And for every sound that people produce, the same sound across any language, no matter where you find it, it's represented by the same IPA symbol. So the second principle is that this chart is organized anatomically. That is, sounds are grouped according to how they're produced. So let's just have a quick look at that. So there are different groupings here that we'll talk about in a minute here. So instead of alphabetical order, which usually has very little to do with how things are pronounced, they're arranged according to how they're produced. Right? So the IPA is useful for doing phonetics. It's a great tool for that, but it's important to remember what it isn't. The IPA is not a replacement for the writing system of your language or of any other language. It's also not meant as a way to control how people speak. It's meant to describe how people actually speak, not control how they should. And the other thing is the IPA, knowledge of the IPA isn't necessary for learning any language, right? We all learn our first language before we can read anything. So obviously we didn't need the IPA for that. And we don't really need the IPA to learn a new language. So it is useful for describing the phonetic characteristics of sounds, but it's only, that's its only role really for helping us understand the phonetic side of things. Now, we're definitely not learning the whole IPA in this course. We're going to learn the bits that you need to do phonetics in your language. The full IPA, you only need to learn that if you're comparing lots of languages, if you're digging really deep into the study of phonetics in general. Now, why aren't we learning the whole IPA? Let's look at a little bit of stuff. Here's the consonants of the IPA. This isn't even all of the consonants. It's just that first group of consonants in the chart, the main group. There are 59 consonants in this chart. We're going to cover about 20 of them. There's also a lot of technical terms here that we don't really need to get into in detail to understand what we're doing with the languages we're working with. So those are 59 consonants. There are also about 20 characters here. These are some other consonants, more interesting consonants: clicks, implosives, ejectives. I don't know if we'll have to deal with clicks or implosives in this course, but I know ejectives are found in some indigenous languages such as Dene, Sultane, Tlichon, and so on. So this sounds like ta, ta, ka. And if your language uses ejectives, we'll be talking about it. And some other sounds here, including the W. We'll talk about double articulated sounds in a bit. Here's the vowels. There are 28 symbols here in the IPA. Most languages actually use around half of them, or sorry, around 5 of them. I beg your pardon, not even half. The ones that have the regular letters A, E, I, O, and U. English uses a few more of those, so I might introduce some of those. But you're almost certainly not going to have to deal with all 28 of those with your language. Some languages use nasalization and tone, so we'll have a mark for each of those. and that's from this chart. This is diacritics on the left, things that we add to letters to tell us more about how they're pronounced. And then there are things like marks for suprasegmental stress, length marks, and we have the tone marks down here. So there's a lot of things. We're not going to spend a lot of time on those. Main reason I went through that is I hope you can see, first of all, the IPA is this huge and very powerful tool, lots of symbols, over 150 characters and diacritics that captures lots of the variety. It's always a work in progress, but it captures almost all of the variety of sounds that we find across the languages of the world. Any individual language usually has sort of 20 to 50 distinct sounds that you'll have to deal with. And most of those are the common ones that you also find in English that I'll be covering in the upcoming videos. So I hope that's a little bit less daunting. So I want to think a little bit more, or go over a little bit more about how the IPA relates to normal writing. So here's a sentence in English. It doesn't look like a sentence in English, and that's because it's written in the IPA. You notice the little slash bracket at the beginning and end of that sentence. It's what do you notice about that compared to the normal version, that sentence written in English? That's actually what it says. This is a sentence in English. It's harder to read, isn't it? And of course, if you got more familiar with the IPA, it would get easier, but it still wouldn't be as easy as the one that's normally that's written in the normal way. And there's two reasons for this. One is you're less familiar with the IPA than with the normal written form. But like, I've been doing phonetics for 25 years as of this September, and I still find the IPA harder to read than regular English. And so the second reason is that the IPA isn't designed just for reading English to understand it. It's designed as a way to compactly describe the pronunciations of words and sentences. And so it's not designed to help us understand, so it's not surprising that it doesn't help us understand. And you'd find the same thing with any other language. Okay, so don't worry if it's a little bit daunting. It doesn't feel familiar. It's not meant to feel familiar right now. But hopefully by the end of this course, you'll be able to use it as you need it. Decide when you need it and use it to help describe phonetics. How does it describe phonetics? That's a great question. So here's a little illustration. Here we have a vowel, the eh. This is actually eh. And here we have a consonant, k, from the IPA. So these are IPA characters. Each character in the IPA means something phonetically. It tells us something about where the tongue is placed and how it's shaped. So with eh, the tongue is to the front of the mouth, slightly closer to the bottom than the top of the mouth. With the k, it's sort of held up and back so that it's touching the soft palate. So each character tells us about what's happening with the tongue. It also tells us what's happening in the voice box. With eh, I have vibration. So if I touch my voice box when I say eh, I can feel the vibration happening there. So this is a voiced sound. And with the k, that other sound there, a k, when I go k, k, the k part, I don't have vibration there. So it's a voiceless sound. Okay, so we see what's happening with the tongue, what's happening in the voice box. And we also get a little bit of information about the nasal passage, right? Eh, that little squiggle over top of the vowel there is a phonetic indicator that the nasal passage is open. This is a nasal vowel. With the k, it represents a non-nasal sound, so it's telling us the nasal passage is closed. So as a linguist, you'll learn to use the characters you need as a shorthand for all of these facts. So I don't need all of that stuff around the eh. I just need that letter eh with the tilde, and I get all of that information. I get just the letter K, and I have all of that information as a phonetician. So that's the power of the IPA. That's what it's supposed to be for. That's the value in it. So this video It's getting a bit long, but it's just about done. It's introduced the idea of the IPA. In the next videos, we'll get into its content. We'll look at some of the common consonants and vowels, and we'll learn which symbol goes with which sound, and how we can describe those sounds based on how they're pronounced. So as you dive into those videos, keep in mind the main point of the IPA. It's consistent. Each symbol always represents the same sound, and each sound is always represented by the same symbol, no matter what language. And it's organized according to how the sounds are pronounced. So that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one.